Are we ready upstairs, Tonya?
Yes, we are ready.
Good evening and welcome to the October 19th, 2023 meeting of the West Sacramento Planning Commission. Tonight's agenda is available on the counter along with requests to speak cards. A reminder to everyone that requests to speak cards should be completed and turned into the clerk prior to the completion of any staff presentation. For those speakers wishing to speak on items not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of this commission, please write item 1 on your card. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised, so all speakers, in order to be recognized, must be called on by the chair and come forward to the microphone. Speaking in public may cause some individuals to be uncomfortable, so everyone is asked to be professional and respectful at all times. And just a note on the microphones, please be sure to speak into the microphone so we can get recorded upstairs. That's commissioners and the public. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Tanya, can you lead us in the pledge? We'll start with General Administration Function, Part 1. Item 1, presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the Commission. Do we have any speakers on Item 1?
We do not have any requests to speak. We did receive one earlier today, which was provided to the commissions and uploaded to the website.
Okay, yeah, and we did receive that written comment. And Item 2, correspondence and staff communications from the Planning Commission Secretary.
Yes, 2 items to note for you. There was additional public comment that we received today regarding agenda item number 5, so we have provided that to you as well. And then I would also like to make note that City Attorney's Office, Mona Ibrahimi, is joining us tonight, pitch hitting for Andreas. She was our Planning Commission counsel for many years in the past before moving on to other things, but we're glad that she is here to help us this evening. That's all for staff communications at the time.
Okay, thank you, and welcome back for tonight. Okay. Item 3, disclosure of ex parte communications. Any commissioners have anything to disclose? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda. Consideration and approval of the minutes from October 5th, 2023. Any corrections or a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jackson.
And we do need to take public comment to
Second.
see. I'm sorry, we should just make sure there's no one from the public that wishes to pull an item.
Any comments for item 4?
No request to speak on item 4.
Thank you. We have a standing motion from Commissioner Jackson. Did we get a second from Commissioner Squires? Okay. And we have a second from Commissioner Squires.
Commissioner Squires?
Aye.
Commissioner Wong?
Aye.
Commissioner Olivares?
Aye.
Commissioner Linker?
Aye.
Vice Chair Jackson?
Aye.
Chair Sablon?
Aye. With that, the minutes are approved. Thank you. And moving to item 5, it's public hearing on 3130, 3350 Promenade Street, conditional use permit, tentative subdivision map, number 5223 for condominium purposes and design review. We have Mr. Hardy presenting.
And just quickly before that, I'm sorry, can the record please reflect that Commissioner Delgado was present at 6:04 p.m.? Thank you.
Is it on now? There you go. The project before you, it does have all those entitlements. I want to make sure that we clarified it's a tentative subdivision map. The notice did include vesting. That is not the case with what's being presented tonight. It is for 208 rental apartment condominium residential community. As you mentioned, it's at 3130, 3350 Promenade Street, the southwest corner of Promenade Street and Southport Parkway. It's adjacent to Savannah Apartments to the west, industrial buildings to the north, an existing 7-acre site zoned the same on the east side, and then Bridgeway Lakes residential community and park to the south. The project site itself is roughly 12 acres and exists on 2 parcels currently. As mentioned, it is a tentative subdivision map, conditional use permit, design review, and CEQA is the entitlements being requested. The project site is zoned MUNC. There was some confusion. It is zoned neighborhood commercial. We're not looking to rezone it. It is permissible with full residential, and commercial below is permitted by right. The reason why the project needs a use permit before this body is because they are presenting a full residential project with no office, no retail component, which is permitted with a use permit in the zoning ordinance. So that's what we reviewed, and that's what we brought forth. The total 208 units, there's approximately 104 buildings divided that make up that total amount. It includes a leasing office, includes a pool, mini outdoor play area, dog park, and recreation facility for the residents that reside. The secondary access is on Golden Gate. That is only for emergency services or services and to be rendered if the Promenade Street, which would be the primary access point, is what is designated. They are planning to have a gated community, but that will be internal. So the leasing office is free for patrons or prospective renters to come in. They wouldn't back up onto the right-of-way, and you won't see a wrought iron gate right on the street frontage. You will see a perimeter wall around the residential community, like many subdivisions as well. The design review portion of the project is mainly a stucco exterior with some earth tones. It has modern architecture infused with some of the Creole style, which is required by the Southport Design Guidelines and PD 21. The project is located, even though it's a residential project, it is in Southport Industrial Park, along with Savannah and River Chase, which is to the west. The project in itself, the density is about the same. It's about midpoint between both River Chase and Savannah Apartments, around 17 dwelling units per acre. We did receive, at the time before we printed the staff report, 5 public comments. I summed them up in the report, but to clarify, they mainly revolve around the rezoning. Again, it is not being rezoned. It is permitted with a use permit to do a fully residential project at this site. The use permit is because, again, they're only doing residential. If they were doing an office, commercial, retail on the first floor, all residential above, it would be permitted by right. Retail, the site itself has been zoned a variety of commercial zonings. In 2016, we added another mixed use at the property owner's request to further expand the horizons for prospective buyers or lessees to come to the site. For 30 years, it has been zoned commercial. This is the first project that has come forth that has made it this far. Schools, they mentioned school capacity. Staff reached out to Washington Unified. We looked at their master plan, and both between looking at the master plan at Bridgeway Lakes School and discussions with the facilities manager, the capacity of the school is currently under its maximum capacity. We trust that the school district has provided the information. They are their own government entity, separate from the city. The applicant is required to pay their SB 50 fees, which is by state law, fully mitigating their obligation to that. Traffic is the next one that came up. It was reviewed with regards to the general plan in 2016 with regards to traffic flow and the capacity of the roadway network in and around the project site. It was anticipated that the traffic would increase over the general plan horizon, which this general plan is 2035. To basically degrade the intersections or the capacity, the override was taken as part of the general plan update with traffic that are intersections or roadway networks that are inconceivable to fully mitigate cost-wise and land. The remaining comment I wanted to clarify would be the roadway conditions. Actively right now, we have a program, it's called the Neighborhood Pavement Preservation and Arterial Streets Pavement Repair Project. That's a mouthful. Currently in progress with the Capital Projects Department. This involves paving, sealing in the upcoming weeks, if not ongoing now, and that will continue through the early 2024 calendar year. In terms of infrastructure for the project itself, non-traffic related, all that infrastructure is currently in as part of the SIP improvements that were done back in the late 90s in discussions with staff and other departments. All those capacities and fully anticipated the development of this project, and there's no impact to those facilities from this project. The applicant is in the audience tonight, and they do have a slight presentation for the commission. That concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Thank you. Any questions for staff at this point? I'm not seeing any at this point, so I'm sure we'll have some for you later, Justin.
Okay, no problem.
We'll open the public hearing and take public comments on this item. Tanya, do we have any public comments on this?
We do not have any public comment request for these items.
Thank you. And as Mr. Hardy mentioned, we did receive written public comments that we all received. And did the applicant have a presentation? Okay.
Thank you, Chair Sablin. My name's Rob White. I'm with Lewis Land Developers. It's a little surreal being on this side of the dais. I was a planning commissioner back in 2003 to 7, so I sat in your seat right here in West Sac City Hall. So I understand what you're going through and the questions that you might have. Tried to anticipate a lot of those with my presentation. Hopefully I got most of them, but we are available, obviously, for questions afterwards, et cetera. The PowerPoint that you see above, you should have also a bound copy there at your desk. Next slide, please. First and foremost, the thing that isn't always commonly known is who the developer is. We are a family-owned developer, been here in California since 1955. We were founded down in the SoCal area, Claremont, if you're familiar with that area. I grew up near there, by the way. And through the years, we've expanded from just home building, which is where they started with about a 65-unit development down there, and expanded into numerous different areas of development. And in fact, we do all of the areas of development now, including master plans, et cetera. So that includes things like residential, but also multifamily, industrial, warehouse, commercial, retail. I bring all that up because some of the comments that were brought in by the community were about retail. And one of the things that I can assure you we did in looking at this piece of property was to think about retail first and foremost. That has always been a push by West Sac. In full disclosure, I should also mention I'm a 20-year resident of West Sac. I live up in the Washington Square area. So always been interested in retail, and you might know where Teriyaki Madness is now. That went vacant for 10 years and was a coffee shop, another coffee shop, and then ultimately now Teriyaki Madness. So I'm familiar with the cycles of what retail looks like, but we don't want to lose that point of we personally, as Lewis, have been involved in many, many retail projects. Retail doesn't work here, unfortunately, which is why we came forward with this project this way. The other thing to note, again, I won't read through the whole slide, but the other thing to note is we manage and operate, own about 12,000 units across California and Nevada currently. And we're in the midst of adding about another 2,000 units over the next 24 months, and then several more behind that. The reason I bring that up is some of the areas that you're familiar with, such as Natomas. We run the homecoming product up there in Natomas. We have some products over in Sacramento, Roseville, down in Vacaville. So we are a apartment and rental community operator, and we've done that for a considerable amount of time. The other thing I want to note is it's not just about operating and maintaining a property, it's how are you ultimately managing that property. And what this slide is meant to demonstrate is that we continue to win awards for our management process, not just out of our building. So one of the important pieces of this is if you look at the 16 consecutive years in a row, which we've won the CEL Associates National Multifamily Customer Service Award. It's a mouthful, I know, but that's an important factor because that's a national ranking, and it's done based on other similar type developers of our size and what they do, and we rank frequently in that high level. We also rank in the top 10 for developers our size in the J. Turner on-site online survey that we send to our residents annually. So these are important factors because what you aren't just approving is whether or not we could and would build this, but also how would we operate, maintain, and would we be good neighbors? So that's part of what I wanted to bring up as well. It's already been brought up what the sizes are. These are duplexes. I know the word condominium has shown up a couple times in the staff report, et cetera. They are significantly dense. It's 17.5 units per acre. As you know, the neighborhood commercial serving zoning allows you from 12 to 60. So we're on the lower end, ironically. But that plan was put together back in 2016 with the general plan. So we are in compliant, but also at the same time, we're understanding of those concerns about traffic and making sure that we can good neighbors. The other thing that's probably lost on this is it looks and smells a whole lot like a duplex project, but it actually lives like a rental community, an apartment complex. It's got a full amenity set, it's got a pool, it's got a fitness center, it has a common room, it's got outdoor spaces, it's got a dog park. So as you look at the plan of this, it's not just the duplexes that are there, it's all the amenity set that goes with it. Having lived here for a considerable amount of time, there's not a whole lot of product like this in the West Sacramento area, specifically in Southport, but generally as a community. So what we wanted to do was bring something that was interesting, new, lean forward into the market. And one of those things is to address ultimately how many folks are now making the choice to rent versus purchase, partly because of interest rates, partly because there's lack of stock. But if you look at just general surveys, people are just making different life choices. So we're leaning into that concept. And again, having managed and operated 12,000 units across Nevada and California, we're starting to get pretty good at this. So next slide, please. This is the site. I'm sure you've already seen it. Many of you probably driven by it. Next slide. Yet another aerial, please. Next slide. This is the plan I was talking about. As Justin mentioned, as you come in, it doesn't feel gated because there's actually a hammerhead before you hit the gates. So as you come into the leasing office, the fitness building, there's guest parking right there. So it will feel, even though you're going to come off the street, it will feel like an open community. It is gated for security reasons, but also gated because that's the way we like to operate our communities, and we do that very successfully. Again, I harken back to some of the stuff here in the local area, and we see that as a good neighbor opportunity, but also as a way for us to control parking on site, a way for us to control residents' actions on site. So it's a trade-off. I do know that having been a resident here for a while, gated communities have been a concern and a conversation point, and we purposely made sure that those gates sit outside the view range of anybody coming in on the street, so it won't feel that way. They might see this on Promenade. Thank you. As was mentioned already, the project is consistent both with zoning and general plan. We are here for a conditional use permit, which is a thing that we can ask for, obviously. But the other thing is, again, some of the concerns that have been raised around traffic, et cetera, is we are going to be paying our full impact fees. We're going to be paying not only traffic mitigation fees, but also obviously school fees. And at 186 units, that rounds out to several $1 million in local impact fees, but also about $1.2 million in school fees that will be generated specifically for the district. So the other thing to note there, and again, it's, any of you have done any homework on apartment complexes or rental communities, is they typically generate less children than the norm. And if you look at our own product, et cetera, you would see that instead of being about 2.5 kids per unit, it actually skews closer to about 1, 2, or 1, 3. So there will be less children generated based on the typical product, but again, we'll be paying full impact fees, so it's a trade-off either way. The other thing to note is the community obviously is self-parked, and we have plenty of guest parking. We exceed the parking standards for the city, but every unit has 2 assigned, either in the garage or 1 in the garage if it has a single garage and 1 right next door parking spot. So every unit will have ample parking, but again, there's about 79 spaces that are, or excuse me, 93 spaces that are spread throughout the rest of the community for not only guests, but oversized vehicles, et cetera. Another thing that's probably not talked enough about for this kind of a community, because again, you probably in rental communities typically think your typical 3-story apartment walk-up. This is a fully private set of utilities on site. So there won't be any public streets, there won't be any public utilities. So once it hits the curb for us, we take ownership and control. What that does for the city is it absolves the responsibility of ongoing maintenance for those things that you would typically have to put in a lighting and landscape maintenance district within the site. So again, private streets, private utilities. We obviously working closely with city staff to make sure that those all get addressed correctly. But that is an important factor, is that there is an alleviation of some of the responsibility that cities typically have for sites like this. The other thing that's not to be lost, and it's just part of where the cities are all going, and West Sac's leaned heavily into this, is those sustainability measures. This is a fully electric project. The only gas coming on site will be for the pool, and that's just because nobody yet has invented a good enough heat pump for the pool. There will be solar incorporated into the project. You're probably aware now with some of the new updating of the utility regs and issues. PG&E is no longer taking net metering off of communities like this, so we have to generate just enough electricity on site. So we'll wind up working with a solar consultant that we already have. We've talked with staff about how we do that, but there will be plenty of solar for on-site, but we won't be generating in excess of that dump back out on the grid. Again, just not something you can do at this moment. Maybe PG&E changes their mind over time. Next slide, please. Just a couple of outside architectural details. Again, as Justin explained, what we've done is we've taken our traditional Spanish architecture and we've done a little Creole overlap on it. This is very similar to some other projects that we're out working on around the communities. But we think it speaks well to what's gone on in that area between the 20-year, or almost over 20 years now, Savannah apartments, but also down at River Chase and how they've accepted the Creole, et cetera. So as you drive through this community, you would see that Creole expression, but we've heavily done it on the exterior so that anybody that drives by the project would see that. Next slide, please. These are just floor plans, and I'm not intending for you to zoom in on any of these. You have them in your packet, but what I wanted to highlight is a couple of things that are different than what you might see in a normal apartment complex. Not only do you have direct access garages, so they go right into the kitchen and or first floor, but you have great rooms. You have kitchen islands. You have dual sinks in most of the restrooms. You have primary bedrooms that are full ensuite with larger spaces, walk-in closets. Next slide, please. And so every one of these, as you look through the different architectural details of the interior of the floor plan, and I realize that's part of the design review, but we've really thought about the ultimate end user and how those individuals living in a community like this, what would they be looking for? What are the opportunities that they're seeing inside their living quarters? What's also not to be lost on this is just outside their backyard, every one of these has a private backyard space. It's not a big space, but it is a space nonetheless. And if you should, next slide, please. These are some of the interiors, the garages, et cetera. Next slide, please. Here you can see what we've done is we've tried to demonstrate what those backyards could look like. And so they have a little notch out where the house drops back in at the porch, and then it's about 5 to 6 feet depending on where they are. To give you maybe context, again, I mentioned I live up in Metro Place. I live in the Metro area, one of those units, and my backyard looks like this. So and if you think it is a struggle to live in a place like this, it's actually perfect. It's perfect for a couple of small dogs or a child, and a little bit of outdoor space. Get you some fresh air. So from context, I just want to make sure that it's not lost that we were thinking about the end user, but how do you wind up giving them something different than you would get in a normal 3-story walk-up where they would wind up having just a small balcony. Instead of 70 square feet, now they have about 150 to 200 square feet. So it's a substantive difference when you're talking about a rental. Next slide, please. Again, just plan view, what we've tried to show here architecturally, landscape-wise, is that we're going to spread a lot of large trees to the degree possible. As we look at the edge condition with Savannah, we'll obviously look at how we can enhance that. Part of the thing that has to go in here is also making sure that we provide the correct fire access and overhangs. So what we've tried to do is really heavily landscape. The other thing that's probably not apparent from this, but if you were to visit one of our projects that's very similar, is because of the two-story height and because the buildings are close together, you get significant shading throughout the day by the buildings themselves. You would also see that what we've done is put in a significant amount of smaller landscape shrubs, tall bushes, et cetera. So we want people to feel like it's a home, like it's a neighborhood, but we also want them to have that shading. We have hot summers here. We want to make sure people don't wind up having issues, but also addressing the city's heat island effects, et cetera. So next slide, please. One of the comments that's come up is how come there's not retail on this corner, and just spend just one more moment on that, if you don't mind. We did look at that. We looked at the market. We looked at what we could possibly bring to this area, and the problem is there's ironically just not enough energy with the number of houses and units that might shop here. Part of that reason is because on the north side, as you're well aware, is the industrial park, so you've lost half your radii of what would have been walkable shoppers. But the other thing I tried to demonstrate here is, as I mentioned, living in town, is I walk a lot. I walk to Frankette's, I go to the ballpark, I go to Treehouse, I live across the street from Sal's, so I'm constantly out walking, and I can tell you, and you know this as your own residents, those businesses struggle because they're not having enough foot traffic. Every business needs those locals. We walk to Frankette, even though it's like this, about 1.25 miles. We go down there because we know they need that customer base. They need that frequent visit. So the reason there isn't retail isn't because we don't like retail or we don't think retail works in a general space like this. It's because it won't work here because you've lost half your customers. And there is also a lot of energy that's been put onto Jefferson and the Lowe's Center. And I frequent all of those very, very often, both on my bike as well as coming down by car occasionally. So that was what this was meant to demonstrate, is that you could logistically get on non-main thoroughfare over to Lanise's, who always will welcome the business. And you can get there in a 30-minute walk or in a 7-minute bike walk. And if you want to go all the way over to the Target Center, bike in 15 minutes, a little longer walk. I'm sure some of you have done such walks, but bikeway probably more reasonable. But you can, and I encourage those folks that will do this. We, based on our surveys, et cetera, know that a lot of our residents are those individuals that like to walk, they like to get out, they like to recreate outside. So this kind of opportunity actually works well for them, and we see this in some of our other developments as well. Next slide. So that, I think, is enough from me. I am obviously available for questions. I'm happy to dig into whatever part you'd like, and I'll just make myself available as you need me, unless you have questions right now.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the commissioners at this point? Commissioner Squires.
So has the fire department determined that a hook and ladder truck can get up in there because there's a 2-story units? And it looks like it's kind of narrow and the turns are kind of sharp?
Yes, sir. They don't need the fire truck. They don't need the hook and ladder truck to go through here. And they have done the fire diagram. Actually, in your packet, you'll see we've done a fire radii, and they've actually reviewed that and approved.
Okay. Another question. Can you describe airspace condominiums? That's what it was mentioned inside the...
Yeah, and apologies. I know it gets a little confusing. Our intention, as I mentioned, is to own, operate, and maintain this project in perpetuity. Since 1979, when we entered the multifamily market, we've sold 80 units out of that 12,000 that we currently own and operate. Our intention is to keep this. We don't plan to get rid of it. The reason we're asking for the condo mapping opportunity is if someday in the future the family says, hey, we just don't want to be in this business anymore, how would they then access that, that property? And they would wind up being able to go out for sale opportunity at that point. So airspace means that you own everything in common. An HOA runs everything on the ground, so the amenities, et cetera. And then you own your building and everything above it. So the backyard is your private backyard, your room, Your house and your rooms are yours, your garage is yours, but you own the driveways with everybody, you own the amenity set with everybody. Not that dissimilar to some of the communities we already have here in town, my community being one of those. We own a lot of common space as HOA, and it gets maintained that way. So it's not intended to be a condo project. It just has that option sitting behind us if ever the Lewises decide they want to get out of the business, but we don't see that coming forward. So.
Any other questions?
Thank you. In some of your existing projects, who is your clientele and who would be your clientele for this project?
Yeah, so obviously it's geographic dependent. So we'll use Natomas Homecoming as a great example. A lot of young professionals, a lot of individuals in their 20s and 30s. We do have obviously all groups, all age brackets, but it is primarily young professionals. If you move to another community like where we have our offices over in Rosemont, it's folks that are in their 40s and they've got a couple kids. If you move to some of our products, maybe out in Vacaville, kind of a mix between the two. So it kind of depends. We think this product here, because especially you have the job center across the street, but also because West Sac is so close to the greater regional employment centers, we think this is going to be a lot of young professionals in their 20s and 30s. Probably not a huge amount of kids. And I think majority-wise, you're looking at individuals that are either not ready to buy or have tried to buy in the market and become frustrated and are looking for a house experience without being able to, at this point, be able to purchase or just not purchase at all. We think that's who's going to show up, and our market research says that's who's going to be. So.
And just related to that, what is going to be the price point for rental you have?
So they're all market rate. And right now, we think, and again, you know, the market changes. Right now, we think the smallest unit is going to come on the market at about $2,750, somewhere in that bracket. That's about $2.30 a square foot, ranging up to the largest unit, which is a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, go for somewhere around $3,600. So those are all with the market. If you look at what's going on across the ballpark, with can't remember the name of it, the one across from Sutter Park now. That's where their range is. That's about what they are. But they're, remember, stacked units there. They don't have the backyard amenities and the garages themselves. So, but that's about where things land in the for-market world.
And I think we have another public comment.
Thank you.
Chair Sablon, I recommend now we should formally open up the public hearing, take public comment, and then close public hearing and bring it back for deliberations.
Okay. Yeah, and so we'll keep the public hearing open.
Colin Branton?
Hello, my name's Colin Brayton, and I live in the Ridgeway Island community, and I was one of, but thank you for whoever clarified the zoning piece, because that was.
Can you speak a little closer to the mic, please?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
One of my comments via email was about the zoning, and I was concerned that it was one of the last spots near our home that could have any potential for commercial or businesses, a place to grab a sandwich if I something. So my concern is that once this is all housing, that's it. Saw the graphic. Sorry. On the graphic, it takes about 50 minutes to get to Target or Nugget. It's about a 2-hour round trip for us to get a sandwich or groceries or anything by foot. If on a day off, if we want to do anything, we have to get in a car, and at that point, we're pretty much just going to Sacramento and taking our money outside of West Sac, which is disappointing. We really like the area that we live in. We'd like to have something to be able to walk to, and this seemed like one of the last opportunities for our area, or people to the west of us specifically, also for businesses to come in. I do recognize that density-wise, it's a bit of an issue with how much industrial there is surrounding it. That complicates things a bit. But yeah, I was just really hoping that we would have an opportunity in the future for something that could residential and commercial. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Did we have any additional comments, Tony?
We have no additional requests to speak on item 5.
Thank you. With that, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for deliberation. Any deliberation from the commission or questions for staff? Commissioner Squires.
I'm wondering if the idea of a bridge across the ship channel that's been considered for the future, if that has any bearing on traffic for this unit.
That improvement, what we generally refer to as the enterprise crossing, is very important long-term for Southport. And so that is a project that we are at the early stages of now in terms of going through a preliminary design. There's a lot of variables associated with it, and we're definitely talking about a $200 to $300 million project. So most of which funds will ultimately come from state and federal sources. But long-term, that crossing, whatever form it takes, will be very important. From Promenade and Southport Parkway, it's about a mile less to the freeway one way, which 1 mile, with everybody can add up. So we also would hope that that crossing would absorb most of the truck traffic, so that we also wouldn't have trucks on Southport Parkway north of Promenade down the road. But this is a big lift. It's still probably several years away, but it is a priority for us, and we absolutely need it to finish out Southport, which still has a long way to go in terms of units yet to develop.
So that was taken into consideration when the traffic analysis was done?
Yes, I brought an item specifically to the city council to ask them to let me include the enterprise crossing in our general plan EIR, assume it would be in place by our horizon year, because it offered tremendous benefits. The trade-offs without it would be difficult, especially from a pedestrian and bicycle standpoint. So that enterprise crossing is definitely going to be very important to us, and we need to get it in there as soon as we can, noting it's still several years away.
I just had a general comment. In Mr. White's presentation, he mentioned that retail doesn't work. And I do believe that there's some truth in that statement, but I also resonate with Colin's statements. So while I recognize that housing is important, especially mixed-use communities, and if we've already discussed this on previous items, please let me know. But I am curious to know what the city is currently focusing on in an effort to ensure that our existing retail spaces, small businesses continue to thrive and or continue to meet a future demand of all these housing projects that come before us, as well as all the folks that are going to eventually fill these housing projects. How are we meeting that delta?
Yeah, well, there was a time when we were actually seeking a lot more retail because we had very little. Anyone can remember before the Lowe's Center went in, or before out there where Walmart and IKEA are, we had very little retail. I think in this day and age, it's about trying to preserve what retail that we have. We have about a 5% vacancy rate in retail spaces currently. Some retail that has been built in different centers around town prior to the recession has been vacant to this day. And we have seen some restaurants, close of late. So I think our mission here is twofold. Is we obviously have a housing need in and of itself, but we're also actively out trying to recruit additional businesses that will come to town, especially ones with higher wages that will be able to help support these businesses, and hopefully even allow people to even reside here, and thus be able to support these businesses not just while they're at work, but while they're at their leisure time. So this is a big effort. Rooftops are everything when it comes to retail. And we've had quite a bit of rooftops still built in the last 10, 12 years. But still, we have more to go to be able to, I think, support the retail we have. Restaurants are a big example. Most of our restaurants, even now, still have to survive largely on a lunch crowd. And some of them, I imagine, are probably struggling given how many people may be working from home these days versus what used to be in the case in the past. So this is a big, important effort for all of us to make sure we are shoring up our existing retail. It's kind of hard to imagine seeing a lot more retail being built from the ground up for the foreseeable future, given the vacancies that we have in different parts of town. And the 5% vacancy rate is relatively high. So and we all know retail footprint with e-commerce and everything is still very much up in the air. I think we had a similar discussion about this a couple of meetings back when we were looking at the River One Phase 2 project over on 3rd Street, where ideally it would have had some retail along that frontage, but in reality, it probably would be vacant retail for a long time. And even the retail that we put in the ground floor of the West Gateway Place project over at 5th and Tower Bridge Gateway, one city department is actually occupying the ground floor where that retail was supposed to go over there because we just never got any nibbles. And on this site, this is the first project that I've ever seen even come half this far, let alone come before you for a decision on this site in at least the over 20 years that I've been working on it. So it's a very much evolving and dynamic environment, but if anything, retail tends to be shrinking, not growing footprint.
Thank you, Mr. Tilley. I just wanted to make sure that as a commission body, retail space mixed use is important for us as well. We do hear our constituents and do want them to recognize that the city is in fact paying attention. I'm not sure if that information was new news to you, but at least we can go on the public record this evening.
And there is a 7.5 acre neighborhood commercial site on Cross Promenade from here that's out there that I think perhaps longer term could be more suitable for this type of stuff, because given some of what's behind it, I think more housing on that site could be problematic with just some of the adjacencies to some of the industrial development that's happened just north of it. So there's still 7.5 acres right on the corner, so high visibility. So I do think we ought to consider that one for some of this potential down the road as we get more employment and more rooftops to support it.
Yeah, and I had the similar concerns about retail and drawing retail into that area. But I think Mr. White did a great job of explaining his efforts to, or Lewis's efforts to solicit retail in that area and did their market research. And I thought of that project a few meetings ago too, where we heard from our community and economic development director on just the struggles of trying to get retail in the city.
Yeah, and in Southport, dynamics definitely played out differently. No one thought we would get something like a Target there, which is, I think, more than just a neighborhood level type store. And nobody ever envisioned where Lowe's is that would become a shopping center. The port owned that, and a developer approached them, several years ago, and that was something that was a little bit out of the blue. I don't think anyone really thought that would go in a format, like the way it is, and even to this day, it still has vacancy.
Thank you. I think a lot of the other things we heard too were on traffic, and as we heard from Mr. Hardy, that was analyzed in the EIR for the general plan update, and it's just one of the things we need to, the consequences of having more housing and like the variety of housing this project will bring to the community. We're going to get more traffic and more impacts on the roads, but they're working on them. Commissioner Delgado?
I have a question for the applicant. So you mentioned when I asked you about the demographics of the people who you expect to be living here, You expect them all to be at market rate, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you give me a prediction of what you expect to do with regards to affordable housing as required by the city?
Fantastic. We are actually entering into an affordable housing agreement with the city. Justin, do you want to speak to that?
The project is conditioned with, to work with the community housing department. I believe it's, I forget which condition is, but they have to work with the housing manager to effectuate an agreement that will go before council for their request.
Yeah, and the council would retain sole discretion over then the components of that agreement.
That helps.
And just to put another fine point on it, it's condition 41, and they are required prior to the building permit submittal to have completed the execution of that agreement.
Right, yes. I was just curious if there was any information on, any negotiations to that at this point. But, if it's too early in the process, I understand that.
I have a follow-up question from him. So in your other properties, how many of those are affordable housing, like a percentage-wise?
So we typically don't do affordable. We're not an affordable builder. As was mentioned, like West Gateway, that is a specific affordable builder. And now we know right behind that, Jamboree's coming in with yet another piece. So the energy behind affordable, the way it's come out in the market is you have to specialize in that because you can access the tax credits, you can access some of the special funding. Sometimes cities collect fees in order to help fold in those gaps. We aren't a affordable builder. Not that we've never worked with them, we do, but our projects primarily are market rate. The world's changing, and we're obviously accommodating and moving as the world changes. In this specific project, as was mentioned by staff, we're conditioned to help with that affordable requirement through an agreement with council.
I'll definitely would say that that certainly is not affordable because the rents that you're talking about is considerably more than my mortgage, and I have a 3,000 square foot house. And in your presentation, you had also said that talked about the gated component of your guys' developments typically. And I'm not exactly sure on the exact language, but I believe I know over the years there's been quite a bit of dissent from different aspects of the city as far as gated communities in this particular area. I could be wrong, but I believe is it River Chase that's right next door wanted to be a gated community but was denied. I believe there may have been another community or so that was.
Yeah, your recollection is correct. When River Chase went through originally with a different developer, not the one who actually built it, but it was a different developer, they had proposed it to be gated. That was approved by the Planning Commission at that time. This has been probably 7-8 years now, I'm thinking. And then that was actually called up by the City Council at that time, and they did not approve gates then. And this was probably 2016 or thereabouts. So that was then. We haven't really considered that. I don't know that we've really considered that topic very much really since. That was a specific thing that one of the council members at that time had a particular concern about.
If I might add, Vice Chair, one of the reasons for gates on this is, as I mentioned, the entire site is privately owned and controlled and maintained. Unlike River Chase, where those are public streets, open parks, et cetera, is a public amenity. We, the city, are paying for that. In this case, because everything's behind that, we are asking, obviously, for site control, not only for our own safety and security, but the safety and security of the residents as well, and also to discourage individuals that might want to come in and park and utilize the site in other ways. So that's one of the reasons why we typically do ask for gating of all of our multifamily communities. We do this up in Natomas, we do it in Vacaville, et cetera, and it works really well. And this product, what we've done in order to answer exactly that question is move those gates out of the way. It doesn't look like a gated community. There's a wall like you see in every other residential community, but those gates don't appear to the front. So from the front, it will look open and accessible.
But in fact, it would not be. And as long with my other commissioners also, I have concerns about the affordability aspect of it. And I know you're not an affordable builder, but I think that's something that's come up quite frequently in the last few meetings that we've had as far as developments and things like that, is helping to address the affordability issue of housing, particularly in our area. And I'm not sure what the process is or the format is for having that a part of a plan, but I don't know if would that be something that where a certain number of units is set aside for affordable housing or something or anything to that regard? I'm not sure what that would look like. Or
The city does have an affordable housing ordinance. However, how those are effectuated is we cannot compel the production of housing, especially when the densities that the zoning code support the proposed development project. So in those instances where the construction of units is not proposed, the applicant has to pay a fee in lieu of the actual construction. The city accumulates the funds that it collects from those, and then it can be used for a big project or inclusion in others. But we cannot compel them to do that. We can compel them to pay our in lieu fee, which would be incorporated in the affordable housing agreement that they'd have to enter into before any building permits are granted.
okay, and then I'll just go down the list of highlights that I made on my on my presentation, especially when it comes to impacts to obviously the schools and traffics. I was actually on the Washington Unified School Board when the facilities use plan was developed in 2020, and I do not recall that the use at Bridgeway Island Elementary was considered to be under. If anything, it's considerably over. And in speaking with folks on campus and being on campus, because that's the school that my children go to, it would be virtually impossible to put another 200 or 300 students onto that campus. They're currently at 1,100, and they don't have any open classroom. So I don't see. So that's a concern of mine, is how a project of this size then would impact the students in the school community of Bridgeway Island Elementary School, which is directly across the street from this project. And I know it appears as though the use fees are based off of SB 50, which was adopted in 1998. Am I to believe that there has not been any increases or adjustments to that in the last 25 years, where those fees are, what is it? Where did I see that? About $4.08 a square foot.
It's actually I apologize. The update is actually $4.79.
Wow.
So it generates $1.2 million for this units.
Okay. And for $1.29 million that would go to Washington Unified, that might pay for 2 portables, if that, of which they have no space to put.
So in the facility master plan that just got updated in 2023, they actually are having a declining enrollment at Bridgeway Island. And in fact, they're suggesting 2 portables be taken off the site because of that declining enrollment. So what Justin speaks to is having reached out to the district is in fact the way the district is reflecting. But we hear your concern, and we reached out to the school district as well to find out how and what those students might be accommodated. The other thing not to lose sight of is, as we talked about, our use generation. Because of the product and what it is, most of those aren't going to generate the student load you would see in a typical single-family development. I'm not saying there's no students, but there's definitely a reduction in students, and we can happily share that data with you if you choose.
Well, I also know, I understand my concern too, because I understand this is not the only project that's in the works or going to be coming before this commission probably within the next several months that will have development and have that will impact that school in particular. I believe Yarborough is probably going to be coming back up on the block at some point recently. I know I forget the name of the other development across on the other side of Jefferson from Yarborough. That's also Liberty Ranch. Now Liberty Ranch more directly impacts Stonegate. But again, those are all projects that are in the works, in the process. And for there only to have been a 69% or 69 cents adjustment in fees for school districts on that seems in 25 years is, again, I know we probably don't have much to do with it, but that seems absolutely ludicrous in my opinion. So I'll stop beating that dead horse. The traffic impact fees for the development. I noticed it says that where the city is divided into 6 districts with fees per dwelling. I guess with which area would this project fall into? Would it be the 48 or the 4992 or the 1183 or 11873 per dwelling?
Talking about the impact fee for traffic.
And when was that established and adjusted?
Yeah, those fees are indexed annually, so come every January 1st, according to the Engineering News and Record. Most of the things in Southport where it's greenfield, the fee tends to be toward the higher end versus other parts of town where it's more infill oriented, where the fee is lower.
I can't quote for you directly which district we're in, but I believe it skews towards the upper end.
Okay. I'll go ahead and I'll give another commissioner an opportunity for right now.
Commissioner Squires?
I would be interested in knowing, for the school district, going back to the school issue, how much does it cost per student on average to go to school? Because if the new development is putting in 1.2 million, how many kids will that take care of? Will it take care of 100 kids? And they're putting in 200 kids? I mean, I don't know.
So, and I'm not going to speak as an expert here, I apologize, but I'll tell you what little bit I know on the SB 50, and maybe council might add in some more. The school district is the one who sets those fees, and they can come in and they can adjust, and they can say, hey, we need a level 2, which would increase. We have school districts that we also work in that have a higher fee. This school district has decided to set it at the $479, which is the level 1 fee. And they've not justified going up to level 2 because they are in a declining enrollment as a district-wide and specifically that campus. So how much will it generate on a school for a per student basis? I can't speak to that. The school district is probably the better knowledgeable person on those.
So the school district had the option to ask for a higher level, but it hasn't.
Citywide, they can actually set, for district-wide, I should say, they can set a different fee based on a justification that they would go through in their facilities master plan, which they did not.
All right.
Did you want to add to that, council?
I think that Mr. White appropriately responded to that. The only thing that I will say is that when Senate Bill 50 was adopted, it was actually intended as a regulation on municipalities regarding the extent of impact that they can impose on development projects for school districts. So it actually works to kind of constrain our hands a little bit. And we are only authorized by law and the Chawani case that interpreted Senate Bill 50 to collect only the amounts set forth by the school district, which also is limited based on calculations that they have to demonstrate to the state. The only exception to that is if this project was zoned in such a fashion that it was it required a development agreement. Development agreements are unique mechanisms by which there could be negotiations for increases to fees. But if you don't have a development agreement, you are capped at the SB 50 fee. The school district is the agency that makes the determination how to use those funds, whether to purchase property, buy a portable, or use it for whatever fashion to service the student.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners? Seeing any. Vice Chair Jackson, did you have more?
Not at this time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion by any of the commissioners? We could move to continue,
I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for an all-residential project in a mixed-use neighborhood, commercial zone, subject to the recommendations of staff.
We also need included in that motion, I apologize, we can move staff's recommended action, which entails all of the actions, but we need a confirmation on the CEQA analysis as well as the tentative map approval. But if you'd like to just move staff's recommended action as opposed to reading all of that, that would be sufficient as well.
Yes, I will make a motion to approve staff's recommendations regarding CEQA, approve the requested tentative subdivision map, and approve a conditional use permit as recommended by staff.
And finding that the design review for the multifamily residential project is also consistent with the design requirements of the planned development applicable Southport design guidelines. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
okay, so we have
So,
a motion to
yeah,
approve
motion to-
staff's recommendation
Yes,
by Commissioner
full
Delgado.
recommendation.
I'll go ahead and second the motion, but also noting on the record that council hold this item accountable to condition 41, which is to ensure that the affordable housing agreement is adhered to, as well as discussions and efforts to continue to focus on the retail component.
I just want a clarification from council. So that's not an amendment because that was part of the motion and the conditions.
I think that we had a second to the motion and just reminding staff to ensure that the conditions of approval are complied with, especially 41, the affordable housing component, and keep an eye on future retail opportunities for your constituents.
Beautifully stated. Thank you.
Okay, and we have a second from Commissioner Oliveras.
Commissioner Delgado,
Aye.
Commissioner Linker,
Aye.
Commissioner Wong,
Aye.
Commissioner Squires,
Aye.
Commissioner Olivares,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jackson,
No.
Chair Sablon.
Aye.
Any interested party may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission in this matter to City Council by filing a written appeal with the city clerk within 10 days of tonight's action, and that appeal must be accompanied by the appropriate filing fee.
Thank you, and good luck with your project. And thank you, Mr. Brandon, for coming out in person. Moving to administration function part 2. Any commissioner communications?
Yeah, I would like to follow up on the retail aspect of, I guess, just what we've been hearing in general is that retail is impossible in West Sacramento amongst all these new developments. So with regards to the 5% vacancy rate, I would appreciate a report either from Planning Commission staff or the Economic Development staff regarding the rates that are being charged for retail spaces in West Sacramento. I do agree that as I drive around, there seems to be quite a bit of a vacant, empty space that's underutilized, and I'd like to know what part the market is playing in that.
We can have some discussions with our economic development team and formulate, something we can provide to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Tay. Nothing further. Meeting's adjourned.